Welcome back to Plateau TV. It is I, Eric, number 4, and I'm not going to explain that reference until much, much later. Jay the Stingray is with me, as he always is, very capably. How you doing, Jay?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm excited because we're talking Lost, and few things get me as excited as Lost does, so you've got me in a good mood.
I got to tell you, I'm glad you made me do this because I am enjoying the show.
It is very much Lost. Like, so there definitely is excitement in kind of like uncovering the mysteries and learning the characters and doing all that. But very much, I in retrospect, having gone back and watched the show and now knowing how things happen, like the journey very much was like a very special thing. Like being able to watch Lost live on TV, go and check like message boards afterwards, you know, talk to my friends, like discuss like, oh man, what was that? Or how do you think like that? It seems, you know, it's stupid and it's geeky. I recognize that, but that was a very fun time. And when Lost was over, it was sort of sad because I thought, and I continue to maintain, I liked the end of Lost. Very sad, very poignant, but you know, that time was over. Like there would be no more trying to figure out mysteries. Like I think I've told you before that there are some episodes of Lost where like there might be like an image on screen for like a few seconds, and Lost, a lot of things came together in terms of like the period of time in which Lost came on the air. It was really like the advent of social media. Obviously, the internet had been around for a while, but Lost was really kind of, you know, the internet was mature enough that people, you know, there were message boards, people had websites, they talked about it. Social media was coming online, like Facebook was just starting. Twitter wasn't really a thing until later in the run, but Twitter eventually got in the mix. But like people would, like after an episode aired, it was really cool to me. Like people in the community would take their HD TiVos and freeze frame things and upload them and have be like talking about what they see. I mean, there's stuff, again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but like there's stuff later that's like in a foreign language, like whether it be Latin or, you know, if somebody's speaking like Spanish or something, like people would like translate it and we'd be figuring things out. And I like that part of it was really cool. So that's kind of why I enjoy what we're doing here, because while we're not just doing one episode a week, we're doing them in chunks. It's still sort of like you have a little bit of like, there's a little bit of mystery, I think, for you. Like we watched, you know, through Walkabout, and the end of Walkabout is tremendous. It's a tremendous episode, but the ending is like, whoa. Right? Like it sort of refactors in your head, like, well, what show am I watching? And frankly, I think the next 4 episodes, the one you watched, those episodes being White Rabbit, House of the Rising Sun, The Moth, and Confidence Man, you know, again, I feel like as you learn more about the characters, you start to kind of get a little deeper into the show and kind of asking yourself, what am I really watching? Who are these people? What is this island? So that's why this has been, I can only live vicariously through you now, I suppose is what I'm saying. So I'm just sort of generally, how'd you feel watching this week's episodes?
Good. You know, we had a few questions answered and had quite a few more brought up. The writing on this show is so well, the way they weave things together. You know, I'm just so, jealous of that ability. You know, such talented folks, you know, writing for this show, and talented actors, man. Like it's a great casting, because I mean, normally, I told you this before, I don't remember names of characters, you know, but this, like, I pretty much know all the main characters' names, you know, and it's kind of odd for me. Like in life too, I don't really remember people's names. Like I meet someone and like, what was your name again? You know.
I'm Johnny. We're doing a show together here, and
I know your name. I know you well. I'm just saying, in general, when I meet people.
It's true, and I actually, when we were talking a little bit offline yesterday, and something that I think is striking about Lost. Some may disagree. There are some people who disagree with everything, contrarians, you might call them, but I really do think that there are people in Lost, like when you first sort of saw the pilot or the first few episodes, you kind of made a judgment about who they were, what their backstory probably was. And I just give a ton of credit to the writers of Lost for like the backstories of the main characters. Like none of them feel rote to me. They don't feel like cliche or tropes. They all feel very unique and very interesting. Even when I rewatch it, I'm always sort of, and we'll get to it, but like even like the backstory for Sawyer, which Sawyer's episode, his first episode is Confidence Man. Mm-hmm. Like even sort of the backstory for Sawyer, like I feel like we sort of had a judgment of who he probably was. And when you come out of that episode, you're like, wow, again, speaking for me, we'll get to you when we get to that. Well, but like, I remember being like, holy cow, like that is not who I thought this guy was.
Right.
And so, one of the things, like since we've been kind of getting into the show, and I've seen it before, I have been watching some of the episodes, but I've also been trying to refamiliarize myself with kind of the behind the scenes, the initial creation of the show, sort of the creation of the first season. And one of the things that has come out, which was something they never admitted to at the time, but in retrospect makes perfect sense. You'll probably, I suspect you'll find this interesting, is that both Damon Lindelof, kind of the core creative talent behind the show, and obviously J.J. Abrams had a role. There were lots of others who did too, but I mean, he really is kind of the engine. And I'm going to butcher his name, but Javier Grillo Markowicz. But he wrote an essay kind of about the show after the show ended. But one of the things they talk about is that when you, like, just the concept of Lost, there's a plane that crashes on an island. The reason why everybody kind of laughed at that at first is that really the only other reference people have for this kind of show is Gilligan's Island. That wasn't a plane crash, obviously, but it's still that a bunch of different people crash on an island, and what happens when like the question, even on Gilligan's Island, even though it was like a comedy, is like, well, how are they gonna get off the island? Or it sort of became on Gilligan's Island, how are they almost gonna get off the island and then have Gilligan screw it up at like the 11th hour, right? So when Lost was first created, that was kind of the thing, is a plane crash show on an island. It's like there's a lot of inherent problems with the premise, because your audience is going to be wondering, okay, when do they get off the island? Like, and then there's lots of other things that go with it in terms of like the kind of stories you could tell that inherently just aren't that interesting, like survival stories. And it's funny because, the first episode, maybe this is a good segue, but like White Rabbit, first episode we watched, that's a Jack-centric story. It deals with Jack's flashbacks. And the body of the story is really about the survivors are running out of food and they're running out of fresh water. And so, Jack, well, there's a few things. Locke decides to set out in search of water. And then Jack, kind of through osmosis, starts doing the same thing. Although there's another story, and we can talk about that. I'll read the episode descriptions from the official all-series manual from the amazing Blu-ray set. But again, the point of that preamble was to say, like, you can only tell so many of those stories. Like, how do they find food? How do they find water? Like, they need to get shelter. And then there's another kind of story you could tell they decided they definitely didn't want, but it's like, maybe building a society. Do they build a society? And then it's like, how interesting would it be not very. But how like okay, they're gonna like run elections or something. Like that's you don't tune in for that. That's stupid.
Yeah.
So one of the ideas that Damon Lindelof brought to the table early, kind of like this is embryonic stage. Like this is watch. So I basically got this from his appearance on the Kevin Pollak podcast, where he talked about basically kind of the core things he brought to the show. The amazing opening where basically it opens on like Jack's eye opening, and rather than open with like, oh, there's a plane crash, opens mysteriously with the concept of this guy. There's just a guy in a suit laying on the ground in a tropical jungle. How did he get there? What's happening? Why does he have liquor in his pocket? Why is there a dog running through? Like disorient the viewer. Yeah. And then as he discovered, like again, he hears a noise, he runs out. Oh, there's a plane crash. Like kind of open with mystery, then rather than doing kind of maybe the cliche thing of like just showing the plane crash to start. Right. But the other thing was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I like that.
Yeah, I agree. Like his sort of core instincts, I think, were right. The other thing he said was, in light of all of just kind of the foundation I just laid, we have to delay the storytelling on the island. Basically, it's like everything I just said. Like, we got to find water, we got to find food. They'll do that. But like, how much story is that really? And is it interesting? Is that the kind of thing we want to get into? So the other concept he brought to the show, which, you're starting, it's funny, that was kind of one of your initial questions when we were talking last time. But the other concept he brought to the show was, what if everybody on the plane has a secret? Mm-hmm. Everybody on this plane has some, like, something they don't want other people to know, but basically just some mysterious reason they were on the plane.
Right.
And what if we learn that reason every week? And so the idea of uncovering those secrets about the people themselves becomes part of the DNA of the show, the flashbacks. It's funny, I think, like in retrospect, to hear him talk about that as like he had to come up with that idea. It seems so obvious after you've watched the show, but it was one of the kind of the core ideas for like, how do you make a plane crashes on an island show work? It's like, you don't start with the plane crash, start with an element of mystery. You do flashbacks to why these people were on the show. And the third thing actually escapes my mind as I was going through that big long preamble. I can't remember the third. He had like a third concept though that he brought, and it's pretty like fundamental to the show. If I remember it, I'll bring it up later. J.J. Abrams is the one who kind of brought the mystery box stuff to the show. Big surprise there. Like, and I'm not going to say any of what his ideas were because some of these things are going to come up later. But like, what if there's something in the jungle and they don't know what it is? That kind of stuff. What if this is a really mysterious place? Like, what could we uncover about the island itself? So those two guys kind of married those ideas together, and to me it's creative alchemy. So, in that spirit.
Hey, can I do my predictions first?
Oh yeah, actually, why don't you? Yeah. So remember, the episodes that Jay just watched were White Rabbit, House of the Rising Sun, The Moth, and Confidence Man. And he has made some predictions based on what he has seen up to this point.
This is what I'm going to do going forward with the characters. I think I got one of these right. For Jack, I said, went through some trauma. I got that right. I didn't really get very.
That's very general, but, I don't know. I'll give you half a point for that.
Kind of vague. I'm saying that that's the only one I got anywhere remotely right.
Okay.
Sawyer, I said a drifter from Oklahoma or somewhere, so I'm totally off base with that. Claire, no, look, I was trying to go, off the, outside the box here. I said Claire's a lesbian. And I said Hurley may have been a teacher. Shannon, I said, grew up wealthy, entitled. Parents went bankrupt and she was forced to get a real job.
Okay.
Charlie, I said kicked out of his band for drug addiction. We found out that's
Okay.
not true. I didn't have anything for Saeed. I'll try to get something next time. Boone.
I would be interested to hear your thoughts. I would be interested to hear your prediction about Saeed, because I think I'd be shocked if you came up with Saeed.
Really?
But
after this episode, I mean, you don't really know what to think about Saeed, or after this 4 episodes, you don't know what to think about Saeed.
Yeah.
After Confidence Man. But Boone, I said accidentally killed someone in a fraternity stunt, and his rich parents got him off.
Okay.
Michael, I said Wall Street broker, insider trading, cheated on his wife.
Okay.
I know he obviously wasn't a Wall Street broker. But I can't put my finger on Shannon and Boone, man. There's something up with them, and I can't figure it out because I know they're brother sister. They have different last names. So she was obviously married at one point or something. You know, I don't know. Maybe they're half siblings. I don't know.
Okay.
But that's my prediction.
Those are interesting. I like those. This is good. This is a good feature to do. So, White Rabbit. While bordering on exhaustion, Jack repeatedly sees a mysterious man watching him from afar. He asks the other survivors if they've seen him too, but no one has. Haunted by the strange vision, Jack follows the man, only to recognize him as someone to whom he was very close. Meanwhile, the water supply runs dangerously low, a situation that erupts into violence when someone steals the last remaining bottles. So, Jay, what was kind of your initial reaction to White Rabbit?
You know, the whole mystery was who took the bottles, and we finally find out, and it's kind of like you can't really be mad at him for doing what he did, but
remember, you can get into spoilers here if you want to name. You don't have to, but if you want to name the person,
Boone, right? So
Boone is the one who took the water, right?
And I mean, it's like you guys have a limited water supply. Like you should have been thinking about finding water before now, because we're 6 days on the island. We find that out when it first starts.
Yeah.
And we found out why Jack was in Australia. We find out where he gets his asshole genes from. And Locke mentions how the island is special to Jack in the beginning. Says, you know, Locke of all people knows this is a special place and something, you know, magical or whatever you want to call it going on. We found that out at the end of Walkabout.
So that's something so a couple things. One, Jack's dad, played by, and I tweeted this the other day, but fantastic character actor John Terry plays Jack's dad, Christian Shepherd, in Flashback. And just, again, excellent casting. Like you said, perhaps a clue to Jack's asshole genes, as you put it. But the other thing of note, which I think I accidentally almost said this last week because I was forgetting episode order, but so last week, that's when we learned, you know, a miracle happened to John. John was in a wheelchair. Now he's able to walk. Mm-hmm. We also saw a circumstance where the monster came out of the jungle. Locke saw it. Right. And then he survived. Like, he was fine. And this episode, now Locke is talking about, so there's a sequence, just to kind of lay it all out. There's a sequence where Jack is pursuing what he believes to be an apparition through the jungle, and this apparition looks like his dead father. Mm-hmm. And at one point, the apparition appears someplace, and Jack runs after him and almost falls off a cliff. Locke saves him. Locke sits down with Jack, and they have what I would describe as, and I would think that perhaps you picked up on this, but if it isn't, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, an important conversation. Mm. Because Locke says what I think you were already figuring out, Jay, which is this island is special. like you say. This is not a normal place. And Locke even says, he's like, listen, we all know it. Everybody's too scared to talk about it. But this is not a normal island. And Locke also expresses his belief that what happens on this island is kind of stuff that, happens for, that it's not a coincidence that they happen to crash and land on this island in particular. And Locke also sort of is anointing Jack a kind of leader, because he's sort of telling him, you've already been leading, and you have a journey in front of you. You need to follow through with it. And so it's just kind of it's an important character moment, both for Jack and for Locke, but also you're getting a little bit of tidbits and some things revealed through John about like where his head's at about the island.
Let me ask you this. This is not like a purgatory type situation, right? Where these people are all dead and this is just where they are. Like, I really hope that's not it.
So normally I wouldn't want to give you any spoilers, but in the interest of just being clear about something, because this was a bone of contention about the series at various points, no. That was a theory very early on in the show, and even the writers themselves at the time, throughout the first season, and even in this, into the second seasons and whatnot, would say publicly, no. This
Okay.
like they didn't give many spoilers, if any, but that was something that I feel it's okay to answer you. No, this is not purgatory. They are alive. They are on this island.
I was just thinking about the show that ended, St. Elsewhere, where there's just a kid like looking into a all those things, a snow globe.
Right. It's not hard to understand why you would think that, but no. Jack is alive. Locke is alive. Everybody who survived the plane crash, these people are alive in the world on an island. That's that much I can tell you.
Good.
So and again, by the way, your answers can be obvious to this question, so don't feel like you have to come up with a creative one. But in White Rabbit, are there any particular characters that jumped out at you? Again, either like, wow, what a performance, or hey, that he really sucked this week, or oh, that was interesting. Who jumped out at you this week?
I don't think anyone in particular in this episode. It was, mainly Jack centric, and I'm not crazy about Jack so far. So I'm sure that'll change. And Sawyer is an asshole as always. Yeah, no one in particular, I don't think.
Okay. And then, so there's kind of a question, and this will continue throughout at least the first season, but there's kind of a general mystery that gets at that I've sort of got on my list, which is, why were they in Australia? And again, this episode, it's Jack centric, and it reveals that Jack was in Australia because his father died and he was going to get his body. That's basically what happened there.
What exactly happened? Was his father mentally ill or something? Like, did I miss that? I mean, I know he was a alcoholic and used pharmaceutical drugs and stuff, but
no, he was not mentally ill.
So what? I mean, what was the deal there? I mean, he just like had a breakdown and went to Australia.
I would say to you that there is more information on that will come.
I know there's something because his mother was like, after what you did, and we never found out what he did.
Right.
So, who knows? And his dad was the chief surgeon, right? Or chief of surgery.
Right. So, yes, it will be revealed what happened, but at this point, you don't know. You just know that Jack got kind of summoned to Australia because his dad died. And there's more to come on that subject.
Cool.
There are a couple of questions, and I try not to be too cute, but I think it's fair given what we've seen on the island so far. To me, the first question would be, so kind of, we talked about it, but Jack, the sort of Jack-centric story, in addition to sort of learning why he was in Australia, the on-island Jack story is Jack has not slept very much, he hasn't eaten very much, and now all of a sudden he is seeing what he thinks, he's basically seeing his dead father. Again, when we see him in the episode, we don't know that he's dead.
Right.
At first, we're not sure, like, he's just some guy Jack is seeing, but that we learn that. My first question, and I think it's a fair mystery, was Jack hallucinating?
Mm-hmm.
The second question, what happened to Christian's body?
Yeah.
Because later in the episode, when Jack finds a fresh water source, he not only finds a fresh water source, he finds potential shelter. There are some caves on the island, and a bunch of crap from the plane, like when the plane ripped open, a bunch of baggage and luggage and stuff fell down. Some of it landed in this cave, one of those things being Jack's dad's coffin. When Jack opened the coffin, he wasn't there. So what happened to his body, I think? Are there other mysteries to you, Jay, as far as White Rabbit?
I don't think that he was hallucinating, only because I think it was something, the island being special. Is I feel like it led him to that water source almost, right? Because he just kind of wound up there.
I think that's a very interesting theory you have there. I'm trying not to be a wise ass. There are certain things like I want to be careful. Like I don't want to lead you.
Yeah.
I want to try and answer objectively. I would say I think that makes sense. Like objectively, what you're saying there, it's interesting that by following that the Christian shepherd representation, Jack did find water. That's true. Now, just playing devil's advocate with the facts we saw in this episode, I would note he also almost led him over a cliff.
Yeah.
Just putting that's something else that happened.
Led him into a cave that collapses.
Well, and that's we're jumping ahead, but that's true. Yes, so coming up. So those were the two mysteries, and then I would note that so one of my other notes as far as things to call out in the episode, Sawyer had a couple of nicknames he dished out in this episode. He referred to Shannon as Sticks, and referred to Jin as Mr. Miyagi.
I missed that one. Yeah, I do remember him saying
that. So I tried to note those where I remembered, and I'm using a few different sources to kind of gather some of my notes, so they don't all keep track of them. But let's try. There are some. He's got some good ones, and those are. I do remember Mr. Miyagi making me laugh. Even when I rewatch it, that makes me laugh. Mr. Miyagi. Okay, so anything else? Was there any other? But just before we move on, though, were there any other mysteries, or is there anything out of that episode that you're still sort of there's an obvious question? I think I captured what are the questions, but you're the one watching these for the first time. Things might be popping out to you that I don't see as questions.
No, just as far as we answered the mystery of why Jack was in Australia in this episode, and that's pretty much all I have for this one.
Okay.
As far as these go.
No, that's good. Okay. So then next episode, House of the Rising Sun, a sun-centric flashback episode of Sun and Jin, the Korean couple on the island who ostensibly cannot speak English. But that's
interesting to me because isn't English almost an official language in most Asian countries now? I mean, don't kids learn English? I mean, you would know a little bit, right? I mean, it's like I know enough Spanish to get by, you know?
I guess that's a fair point. It was funny because like when I've been to Europe before, like I was in France, I never ran into anyone who I couldn't like at least kind of work it out with.
Right.
You know, like even if they didn't fully speak English, and I definitely didn't speak a ton of French, like I was able to work stuff out with them. And you know, South Korea, you know, similarly, it's like a major country of the world. I agree with you. I think that's probably fair, but I don't.
I had a friend of mine that I went to high school with. You know, he went and he was a teacher over in South Korea for a while. You know, he taught English, so and I know they're looking for English teachers. Like you could do it, like you can do it, you know, online. You know, teach English in some of these countries.
Right.
Because English is like a universal language, I think. I mean, obviously that's my given language, so you know, I'm kind of partial to it. But
there's a lot of countries in the world where there's people who speak multiple languages, and English is one of them. That's certainly true. All right, so House of the Rising Sun, and by the way, this one was written by Javier Grillo Marquardt. Again, I'm butchering the poor guy's name, I'm sure, but the writer that I was referencing, who just for context, this writer wrote on Lost for seasons 1 and 2, and was also part of the initial sort of squad of writers that developed the show with J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof, like before, you know, when it was a pilot, and then, you know, developing the first like 12 episodes of the series. He was on the show for the first 2 seasons. So just context there as to
why do you think he left?
Sort of an important. He kind of talks about it in his essay, and I don't think there's any spoilers in that. So basically, Lost's first season, you know, if you read his essay, if you hear Damon Lindelof talk about it, you hear lots of different stories about it. There was a lot of, I used the term earlier, creative alchemy. There were a lot of big ideas, a lot of like talented writers at the table, like David Fury. David Fury wrote Walkabout. Well, David Fury is was a Buffy and Angel writer. Like, so he's, at least to me, that means something. Like a really good writer. You know, he has an ego. For the first 8 to 10 episodes of Lost, Damon Lindelof was by himself the showrunner. Damon Lindelof was like 30 years old. He'd never run a show by himself before. So while he was definitely like a creative engine and a creative force behind the show, a lot of the abilities that he needed to like fully run a show by himself, he didn't yet have. This is why around the time of, I think it was Hearts and Minds. So episode, like again, it's like episode 9 or 10. He brought in Carlton Cuse. Carlton Cuse was basically, he had been Damon Lindelof's boss when he wrote for Nash Bridges, but in the subsequent years had kind of become like a mentor figure. And Damon Lindelof would contact him often, like asking him questions, getting his thoughts on things. And there kind of came a point in the development of the show where Damon Lindelof had like insomnia, stressed out of his mind. You know, this show he's working on has become a mega hit. You know, this network has spent millions of dollars promoting the show. The pilot was $12 million. Like, the pressure was up.
Right.
And he basically was threatening to leave the show. But he called Carlton Cuse and is like, hey, you know, I'm wondering, would you be willing to come help me with this? And, you know, we don't need to get into all the details of it, but like basically eventually Carlton Cuse was like, yeah, you send me some scripts, send me the episodes you have, I'll take a look and I'll let you know. And then he was like, hey, yeah, this is awesome. If you know, if you want me, I'd love to help you. And he did. And so basically they show ran Lost together from about like episode 10 all the way until the end from that point. But I'm not trying to dodge your question, Jay. Like the point is that the first season of Lost was really, there was a lot of like creative chemistry going on in like the writer's room, in the development process. And it was good for developing the show. It was good for getting the show on its feet. But from the perspective of, okay, once we've figured out what the show is, and we need to proceed forward with a direction, with clear leadership, like, then we need to, there are some hard decisions that have to be made. And frankly, it was just like the way that it was represented in Javier's article, and I think Lindelof has kind of said it, but he's kind of too nice to come out and say it. Like, there was a lot of arguing going on. It's like he had a clear vision for what he wanted to do, and the writers were always arguing with him. And you might, and it's not what I don't want to convey is that like Lindelof was some kind of dictator, and it's like it had to be his way or the highway. But it's basically just sort of like, you can have, I mean, think about your own job. I mean, I think about my own, like, you can have creative disagreements. People can have ideas about different ways to approach a problem. But at the end of the day, like, the boss kind of makes the decision. Someone has to make the call. Here's what we're going to do. And I think for Lost, after the first season, it was kind of decided that like there were some people that weren't getting with the program. And even though they were super talented and awesome writers, it just, they weren't, they needed to bring in some new writers. They needed to sort of focus the attention, be more everybody operating from the same playbook. So for Javier, basically he was the only writer from season 1 of Lost, and then from that initial kind of working group that remained with Lost into season 2. And the way he explained it was kind of as season 2 got going, the kind of creative chemistry of the show, like, you used to be able to kind of figure stuff out. And it became less like, oh, writers were given episodes and they could kind of figure stuff out, to like, here's what this episode's going to be. Now you go break it. Like, but here's the direction. Here's what it needs to be. Rather than the writer being able to kind of figure it out from scratch. Or figure it out knowing what's going on and applying their own sensibility to it.
Right.
And he basically, it was basically just like, he kind of didn't fit in anymore, is what it is. But he's Adam. It's not. There's no drama there. It's not like he, left on bad terms or anything like that. It's just that, the show was now mature. It was working. It was running the way it needed to run, and he just kind of didn't fit what they were doing anymore.
Just not a good fit. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's kind of that. So, but I never knew that. Like, so it was interesting reading that piece. It was interesting hearing Damon Lindelof talk about some of that stuff. So, but anyway, that's why.
It's really interesting because I've heard of a lot of shows that really use up writers. Like they'll keep writers on for a season or two, and then just totally, hire and hire new writing staff. Like Seinfeld was a show, one of my favorite shows that I know a lot about. That's what people said about it. So many big names now have, wrote for Seinfeld. Yeah. That's what they would say. They would basically they would pick your brain for like funny stories in your life.
Right.
And then, use all those quirky stories in the show. Like, I mean, it's amazing how much a lot of this stuff in Seinfeld like actually happened to people. And then they incorporate it into the show. Like,
and pretty much lifted almost exactly like what the story was is pretty much what they did. There was a bit of a Seinfeld spin on it. But no, you're exactly right.
What was the fake holiday instead of Christmas that George's family?
Oh, Festivus. Yeah, that actually somebody celebrated Festivus.
It was a real thing.
It might not have been called Festivus, but yeah.
It didn't have the big, pole in the living room, but it was, pretty much exactly like it otherwise.
Right. Right.
You get your family together and you tell them what you don't like about them.
Well, in the case of Lost, I don't know. Like, they certainly did have other writers come on over the run of the show, but I really do, from what I've seen, just in like watching, like, written by stuff go by, there was a season 1 writing staff, but starting in like season 2 and on, a lot of those people were kind of with the show for the duration. Yeah. Like I say, they did bring on new people, and some people probably left, but there are a lot of names that you see come up again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's it was kind of a good, once they got it all worked out, once they got it figured out, it kind of became like a well-running machine. And there's some stuff we'll talk about as we get later into the show that I can reveal as far as behind the scenes stuff that kind of influenced decision making about the story. But generally speaking, like the way the show ran got to be pretty solid, because there's sort of an unsung hero in Lost, a director who I think he's already directed an episode. I don't remember which one he would have done, but Jack Bender. Basically, all the writers, Damon Lindelof, Carlton Cuse, the writing staff, they're all based in LA, like most of these writers are. Jack Bender was on site in Hawaii. And even though he didn't direct every episode, he was kind of like a creative, I think he executive produced the show too. And he was kind of like a creative force, kind of keeping everything, in the right lane in terms of like what they did. And so Jack Bender, if I'm not mistaken, he directed every season finale, including the series finale.
Oh wow!
Of Lost. In addition to many episodes, in the middle too, but like he was like their go-to guy for keeping the show running in Hawaii, as well as kind of the creative direction like on site. And it's not like Carlton Cuse would fly out to Hawaii like every few weeks and like kind of, meet up with these guys and do some stuff. But and so would Damon Lindelof. But part of the reason they brought Carlton Cuse in was that Damon was in LA and flying out to Hawaii and like doing all the writing stuff. It's like, that's why he was getting burnt out. So like he and Carlton Cuse were able to kind of like split the workload and keep from burning out, really. That was kind of the idea behind it. So, House of the Rising Sun, written by Javier Grillo Marquardt. Jin, a Korean castaway who speaks no English, assaults Michael, seemingly without provocation. Saeed resolves the conflict by handcuffing him to the wreckage. Jack's decision to move to the caves causes division among the castaways, and Jin's wife must decide whether or not to free her husband, at the cost of revealing a long-hidden secret. So, what was your kind of initial reaction to this one, Jay?
I didn't write this down, but I did have kind of an idea that she did speak English.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I thought that, but just I kind of thought that to begin with. But it is nice seeing her backstory. So her whole thing is she was planning on leaving her husband, right, and her father, to go start a new life somewhere else because she feels imprisoned or whatever.
That's right. In the U.S.
Okay, she was going to the U.S. Okay.
Well, that's why she knows English. She learned English too. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so she changes her mind at the last minute. I guess when her husband gives her the flower, is that when she changes her mind to like not?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the implication, is that like she, he was a hard man. He was doing some things she didn't like. Their marriage was on the rocks, but like kind of in that moment, I guess she remembered she loved him, or like he sort of showed a glimmer of like the man she married, that kind of idea.
Man, she fell in love with when he was the waiter at the party.
Yeah,
or the server, whatever you call him. Now, was her father like some sort of organized crime or something?
I don't think it's. I don't know that it's officially revealed for some time, but I don't know that it's a huge, like, her father's just like a businessman, like a big businessman. Like I think it's like an automotive company, if I remember correctly.
So
I don't think that's a secret.
At one point, is it Jin, the husband? He comes in and is covered with blood, and it's not his blood.
Yeah,
it's kind of assumed, he just did something,
Well, there's clearly more to learn about that. So this was a son-centric flashback.
Right.
I would like to hope that if we ever get to see a Jin flashback, that maybe we can get more information about what happens there. But no, I mean, I think you're asking some of the right questions there.
Well, and then he says, I do what your father tells me to do.
Right.
So, he's done something, breaking some kneecaps or something.
I'll say only that there's certainly more to learn about that story. But in effect, their marriage was on the rocks. She wasn't happy with what he was doing. He was being kind of an asshole, and she was going to leave him. And she kind of changed her mind and stayed with him. And so, and then they're crashed together on the island. But there's also kind of a story too about the on island story. Jin almost friggin' kills Michael because he sees Michael's wearing like a watch. Michael found some kind of watch in the jungle. Jin freaks out, starts beating the hell out of him. They handcuff Jin to some plane wreckage, which again we just talked about here. But turns out that we need to learn more about that. Maybe that's so. I think that's even kind of a question. Like that might be a mystery, one I didn't even write down. Like, what is the watch about? So it is Jin's watch, but why is it so important? He would like almost kill Michael because he catches him wearing it. Like, what's the deal there?
Yeah. It's like if it wasn't the language barrier, he could just say, "Hey, man, that's my watch," or "That's my father-in-law's watch," or whatever.
Yeah.
And he probably would have given it to him,
Yeah.
But I really like that scene too because they went all out, man. They were not holding back. Like when he hit Michael in the back, like it was like a damn NFL tackle, man.
Yeah.
And then when Saeed comes out and tackles Jin, he hits him hard as hell too.
Yeah, the action in that scene is pretty great. Like it's just a good a good physical scene. So I mean, in terms of like characters that jumped out at you, would maybe like that? Would Jin or Michael or Saeed be among that, or was there anyone else that jumped out at you in this episode?
I think Sun probably does at this point. I'm really interested to learn more about her because you can tell that she's like a compassionate person, and her husband is really. I don't know what his deal is, man, but he's like really conservative but I mean, we're not living in that world anymore, man. Come on. What difference do you care? Shows her shoulders, like we're on a damn tropical island here.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested to learn more about her and about Michael as well. And we do learn a little bit more as he, talks to his son throughout these episodes.
Yeah.
Who, he didn't know. And I'm really looking forward to seeing his whole backstory because, like, he didn't know his son at all, right? Like, pretty much his entire life.
Well, I mean, like what we learned to this point, like, I think Jack at one point asks him, like, how old is he? Michael doesn't really even know how old Walt is, or not exactly. Like, he doesn't have that answer ready to go. So clearly, Michael and Walt are not as close as they could be. There's a period of estrangement. And that's I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say at one point, Walt's like, "You don't know anything about me." He says, "I know all kinds of stuff about you." He said, "When's my birthday?" And he tells him. And he said, "When's mine?" Michael said, "When's my birthday?" And
I do like that exchange. Yeah, that's a good one. But there's an interesting mystery in this episode. So in the last episode, Jack discovered the caves. This episode, it's kind of like, Lost is pretty much like the next day. It's like every episode is a day, basically. Right. There are that over time that may or may not change or adjust or whatever, but basically if you think about it in those terms, it's like a day. I think sometimes in the first season they jump ahead like a few days at a time, but generally speaking, each episode's a day. But anyway, they go back to the cave. They're kind of getting it ready. They discover skeletons in the cave.
Right.
And Locke refers to these skeletons as Adam and Eve. And they have a little satchel with like a black and a white piece in it, and it's
light in the dark.
Yeah, and Locke refers to them as Adam and Eve, and I guess the question would be, who were Adam and Eve? So that's certainly a mystery. Yeah.
And they've been there longer than 16 years.
Yeah. I mean, the way that they were, the way that their clothes and their bodies were decayed. Yeah, definitely seemed like they'd been there for some time.
Jack's a damn expert on everything. He knows how long it takes clothes to decompose.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was making a guess.
40 years. Yeah. That's 40 years right there.
Yes. They've been there a while is the point.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a mystery. Is like, so people were on this island before, and who were those people? So that's kind of a mystery that pops up. Were there any other open questions? I mean, other than the watch, which I didn't write down, I should have. Like, where'd that watch come from? What's the deal with that? But anything else jumping out at you as kind of a mystery to solve?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
I do have one that goes back to the first 4 we watched, which is, why did Locke have so many knives?
It was for the walkabout.
He needed like hundreds of knives for that?
You may quibble about did he need all these knives, but that is the answer to that question. Okay, he had all those knives because he was going on the walkabout. And what I would guess, Jay, is that each knife had like a specific purpose. Okay. Like one was like a filleting knife, one like it's like it seems like he's just carrying a case of knives around, but like for what he was trying to go and do, each one of those has like a specific purpose. And I'm just guessing, but that is the answer. He was going on the walkabout.
Was he moonlighting as a knife salesman? Cutco representative?
Right. So then the next episode you watched was called The Moth. And just interestingly, co-written by Jennifer Johnson and Paul Dini. Paul Dini was one of the creative forces behind Batman the Animated Series. He also wrote the Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City. I don't think he had anything to do with Arkham Knight, but big force in the DC universe, DC Comics. So just noting that, just because it's cool. Charlie, so we know, just from what we've seen in the episodes, we haven't really discussed it much, but we know Charlie's a drug addict. Like, he was doing heroin on the airplane. He was doing it in the bathroom when they were out in the jungle before. We've caught him a time or two doing some stuff, so we know that about him. But The Moth, is a Charlie-centric episode, so we find out what Charlie's deal is. Charlie goes through a personal crisis while Jack is trapped by a cave-in. The castaways struggle to free Jack, while Kate and Saeed attempt to triangulate the French broadcast. But their exploration is thwarted by a mysterious attack. So what was kind of your first reaction to this episode, Jay?
This may have been my favorite of the 4, actually.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. I love the struggle. Charlie's, constantly having struggles in this episode. Like, at first he's struggling with his faith and, staying in the band, and then his brother convinces him to do it. Then kind of tables get turned, and his brother is like cleaned up, and now Charlie's an addict, but he wants his brother to come be in the band again, and he refuses, which it's kind of an asshole move, I think, for the brother to do to him. But just say no. Maybe like, hey, let's get you cleaned up, and then we'll think about it. But no, he just flat out says no.
Yeah.
And then he has the actual struggle with the with the heroin withdrawals throughout the episode. And I love the whole moth analogy. I really love how they wrap that to the whole episode.
Yeah.
It's really, really great. How
that piece, by the way, is yet another standout John Locke moment where Locke, I think they've sort of shown, we haven't talked about it much, but they've sort of shown like Locke noticing Charlie. Locke has clearly picked up on the fact that Charlie's got a problem.
Right. Yeah.
And so this episode, Locke is kind of putting Charlie through a bit of a trial here. And he tells him, you know, you're addicted to heroin. You still have some, but you're eventually going to run out. And when you do, it's going to suck. So why don't you now decide to stop taking it when it's your decision?
Right.
And Locke takes it from him, basically tells him, I will get, you know, you can ask this for me 3 times. And on the 3rd time, I'm going to give it to you. But until then, I'm going to hold it for you. And I'm going to help you try and get over this. And to your point, what Locke explains to Charlie is that, you know, at one point, Locke is, I forget what he's doing. He's like skinning a boar. He's doing one of his mountain man hunting things. And he's just explaining to Charlie, he finds like a cocoon and he shows like, hey, this is a moth. And, you know, right here, a moth is gonna come out of this. But it has to fight its way out to survive. If I were to, you know, use my knife or just sort of open the notch a little bit and help the moth out, it would get out, yeah. But part of what helps the moth survive is the fact that it had to struggle, it had to earn its way out of the cocoon so that it could be strong and thrive. And if Locke were to make it easier for it, it probably wouldn't survive and it would die because it wouldn't be ready for, you know, the reality of the world. So I agree with you that that was a powerful analogy, pretty well appropriate to Charlie's story here.
Yeah, struggle is the key to survival. That's really interesting. Like I could apply that to a lot of things these days. Like I think that's like what's wrong with the, you know, younger generations these days. Is, I mean, even maybe our generation as well. You know, we didn't struggle enough. You know, we had it too easy.
It's I was actually talking to someone earlier today, and we were talking about how, in terms of like advancement, because the person I was talking to, they're kind of in like innovative technology development, and we don't need to get into that. But basically, I was sort of like, well, how does one get into that kind of thing? And this person told me, it's like, you know, it kind of started when the first iPhone came out. Okay. And he's like, it's sort of funny now because we're kind of like the iPhone sort of made us technology snobs, and it reminded me of. And I know he's verboten now. We're not supposed to talk about him, but Louis C.K. used to have a bit about, I'm pretty sure it was like about, I think it was about like smartphones. It wasn't specifically the iPhone, but it was basically like how spoiled we are. That it like, hey, like this device is like this is more powerful than like the first 10 like space capsules. Yeah. Like you can do like anything with this, and we like complain because like our Bejeweled game doesn't work. Like our Bejeweled game is slow. Like this thing can do like 1 million calculations a second, and like we're mad because like the screen like takes an extra 2 seconds to load when we you know are browsing the internet or whatever. And so I think you're right. I think that somewhere. It's a societal thing. I mean, I would say that I think that this is sort of a generational thing. I think everybody says that. I think there were guys I know. That, you know, the early 1900s were like, you've got water that comes to your house. I had to go out to the well. You damn loafers, you know. So I don't know that ever goes away, but you know, it's a fair.
Well, I can apply that to Lost, in that if you're watching along weekly, you had to struggle because you couldn't just stream it. You know, you had to wait.
It is true. Like Lost was, and we talked about this before, but I didn't start Lost week to week until season 2. So I was sort of set up wrong. Like I got to watch the first season on DVD, and I could kind of burn through it at my own pace. You know, sometimes several episodes at a time, because I was like, holy crap, I want to know what happens next. But when I started season 2, like, it was just like the hour never lasted long enough. You know, I always wanted more, and it became a real endurance trial to wait that week.
This is a perfect binge-worthy show. Like I could watch this show probably 2 weeks. I could have it watched completely. Absolutely.
I think that's true. I think that's it's funny because my wife, I think I mailed it to her. Like she wasn't my wife then. I was in college, but we were dating, and I went out to the Walmart and I got lost and I started watching it. And then as I was watching, I was like, holy cow, this is really good. And I started telling my girlfriend about it. And I was just like, yeah, you should really watch this thing. And so I think I sent it to her in the mail. I think she watched it in like a weekend. And that's like 25 episodes. I think she even like skipped class on Monday to watch this thing. It's good. And like
the concept of binge has really come about, recently, within the past decade, or maybe longer than that. But when like DVD sets were released and stuff.
Yeah.
Before that, unless the networks did a special, you never saw more than one episode at a time.
Right. And by the way, I would like to claim, like, my girlfriend and I, now wife, but like, we were binging before it was cool.
Yeah.
We were Netflix and chilling. Like, we used to, I remember one summer, like, I got her into Buffy. Like, I had seen Buffy before, but I had the DVDs, and like, we would watch like Buffy, and like, we did that over a summer one time.
Yeah.
And so, like, we were doing that before it was on Netflix or before it was on Hulu. And so I would like to take personal credit for the whole binge, fad. I was doing it before it was a cool thing to do.
We did the same. Like, you ever watch a show, that is on television and you have to wait like 10 months, a year or whatever? And so you're like, man, I don't even know what happened in the last episode, So it really works out well to be able to do it like this. I know it may be cheating a little bit because, you don't get to experience the way people did originally, but,
Well, one of the things, and again, we're not quite there in Lost yet, but it's just interesting. Like, it's interesting to me, things that we talked about, like, week to week, and I really can't be more specific than that just yet, but, like, there were things that, like, would happen in an episode, and it was kind of interesting how, like, over the course of the week between episodes, people would see something and come to all these like conclusions about it, and then the next episode, like, it wouldn't even really be a thing, or would make very clear very early, like, oh, well, that was nothing, or oh, it's this thing. Like, but people would like fixate on certain details and would talk about like, oh man, like, I wonder if this is that, and it connects to that guy, and I mean, I wonder if this how this is gonna come in. Like, all the time between episodes gave people the opportunity to discuss and to ruminate and to theorize, and it gave people, it made it kind of fun, really, to discuss and to ruminate and to theorize. I'm getting, you hearing that? I was getting some back talk there. But in any case, the other part of the episode was Kate and Saeed and, well, later Sawyer, but Kate, Saeed, Shannon, and Sawyer basically trying to figure out, well, where is the French broadcast coming from? And in this, there's a few things that happen. Like, one, Sawyer lies to Kate about what happens to Jack, and he doesn't really tell her until much later. That, like, oh, well, I guess Jack didn't make it.
Yeah. He's running to tell her. And she's like, what do you want, jackass? I don't care about anything you have to say. And he's like, all right. Whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like Sawyer's very, like, I can see, it is asshole behavior. I don't want to ennoble him, but it's kind of like he was coming to tell her, and then she was a dick to him, and so it was just kind of like, oh, nothing. No, I don't.
I almost don't blame him for that one, though.
Yeah.
She kind of had that coming.
Yeah. But the other part of that story, too, was that while they're trying to triangulate this thing, someone knocks Saeed out.
Was that this episode?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my big mystery now. Who knocked Saeed out?
Yeah. Because it was, and that's one of my, it's like, so who, that's the mystery I had for this episode. Who knocked Saeed out while they were trying to triangulate the signal? And there's also just some good character building in this episode. Like, so you learn Michael was like an architect. Like when they're trying to rescue Jack, like Michael takes kind of like a leadership role. Like, hey, we got to like, hey, don't take those rocks. You can take these rocks. Here's how we have to dig them out. Like, so I actually really like this episode for a few reasons. It like sidelines nosy Jack and lets the other characters kind of like show what they can do, which I just thought was kind of a nice touch.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because I mean, obviously it's Charlie's episode, so Charlie does get the chance to shine in terms of like getting Jack out of there. But I thought like everybody coming together in the cave to help Jack was just a nice touch as well.
Yeah, I really began to like Charlie in this episode. And Boone is like a saint, right? Like Boone like doesn't have a bad quality about him. I mean, I'm sure that's to come, but all he's doing is trying to help people. Man, he almost drowned saving the girl in White Rabbit, you know?
That's right. We didn't mention that. That's right. Boone was trying to rescue. If Boone has a failing, it's that I think Boone. What's that line in Top Gun? It's like my favorite movie line ever. Boone's ego is trying to write checks that his body can't cash. It's like Boone wants to be the hero, but he's not quite up to it.
That's perfect.
But yeah, it's true. It's like it's not like Boone's coming from a bad place.
I mean, you say he stole the water, but the only reason he stole the water was for for Claire.
Yeah,
Claire,
and to sort of ration it, like he thought it needed to be protected. So yeah,
I mean,
that's a good.
He tries to save Shannon in the next episode. That's like all he cares about, and get his ass whipped in the process, and
yeah, I mean, and so. That's a good segue then, Jay. So the final episode that you watched in this bundle of episodes was an episode called Confidence Man. This one is a Sawyer flashback. So far, and you've mentioned it, you've said it a few times. Sawyer's an asshole. Again, he's got some funny nicknames. By the way, I forgot to mention to you because it's sort of just a funny joke in the pilot. Like so, I've mentioned to you the riff tracks. The guys who did Mystery Science Theater 3000, they have a thing they do now, riff tracks.
Yeah.
They did the pilot episode of Lost, like the first two episodes, cool. And it is very funny.
I need to watch it.
In the first, and you can, by the way, because I don't think they don't really spoil anything that happens later. But like the first shot of Sawyer, if you remember, before he says anything, was kind of in part one of the pilot, where he's like sitting next to the wreckage. And he's smoking a cigarette. Their joke was, I always remember it just because it's so unique. It's like, I'm only smoking this cigarette because I couldn't find a railroad spike covered in rhino's blood. He's sitting there. He's like a grizzled looking badass guy. I don't know. Yeah. I always thought that was a funny line. But in any case, yes, Confidence Man, a Sawyer focused episode. A pure character episode. There weren't a ton of mysteries really in this episode. It's really all about, as you were talking about, basically, Boone shows up and someone's kicked his ass. Find out it's Sawyer, and it's because Boone was trying to go through all the stuff Sawyer's been like collecting over these past 8 episodes, scavenging from dead bodies and whatnot. He's got a stash. All because Boone thinks that Shannon, who has asthma, she's lost her inhaler, she's starting to have trouble breathing. He's trying to find her inhaler, and Sawyer takes umbrage at the fact that Boone would dare go through his stuff, so he beats the crap out of him. This then begins a story where we are looking into Sawyer's past, where we find out Sawyer was a con man. Basically, he slept with this like hot woman and kind of tricked her into thinking that he was rich, and he had this get rich quick scheme, and he brought her like husband into the whole thing, and it was all about getting the husband's money so he could steal it. But we have seen glimpses of Sawyer over the past 8 episodes sitting on the beach by himself reading a piece of paper. We didn't know until this episode what was in that piece of paper. After Jack and Sawyer have it out, Jack beats him up a little bit. Sawyer gives Kate the letter. It's basically a letter written to Sawyer saying that he killed his parents and he's going to kill him. when he finds it. Later, Saeed tortures. We learn Saeed has some interesting skills.
Yeah, Saeed's got something going on.
Yeah, and he tortures Sawyer in the jungle using bamboo. I hate that scene.
Old school.
Yeah, yeah. The sound they use for when Saeed is like inserting the bamboo shoots under his fingernails is like, how did they come up with that sound? I got to give the the ADR guy or the sound guy.
It was a lot of interesting sounds in this episode, like when Jack moves to the caves. And then Sawyer shows up and he's going to take Jack's place where he was staying. And he drops the suitcases. It's like a funny, like, clang, when the suitcases hit the ground. Yeah, it's the sound design or sound person does a great job.
But kind of the big reveal, if you can call it that, of the episode was that the piece of paper you've seen Sawyer reading, which we can hear the letter.
Yeah.
The letter is not written to Sawyer. Sawyer wrote the letter to someone else. Basically, the long story is, and we'll learn more about this, but like Sawyer, that isn't really his name. He became Sawyer,
right?
Essentially. Sawyer was a person who did to his parents what he now does. Sawyer's a con man who steals money from people, but when he was a little boy, a con man slept with his mom and stole his family's money, which caused his dad to fly off the handle and murder his mom and then kill himself all in front of him. And Sawyer wrote a letter to that man, but kind of just over the course of his life and maybe some things we'll learn about later, he became Sawyer. He became the man he was hunting and kind of does the same thing. He's a con man.
Yeah, exactly what he says. I became the man I was hunting.
Yeah,
that's great.
And it's just a good sort of, Sawyer is such a complex character. Like I when I was first watching Lost, Sawyer was not my favorite character, and it wasn't because I didn't think he was funny or he didn't like play an interesting role, but it just always seemed like sometimes he was just kind of an asshole for asshole's sake. But I guess I find as I watch the show more, Sawyer is a character that I just come to appreciate more. And I don't know if it's just because Josh Holloway brings such like intensity and complexity and vulnerability to the role. Like there are so many questions about like why Sawyer behaves the way that he does.
I've got some theories, yeah.
Oh, so what would your theories be?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say, like, we do get to see the only bit of compassion we've seen from Sawyer, and that the flashback shows him doing the same thing that his someone did to his parents, but he sees they have a child. And, says no deal. Cancels the whole thing.
He calls off the deal. That's right.
And I think Sawyer's just a guy who's had a hard life, and he kind of hates himself, and he's maybe a glutton for punishment. Maybe he's not aware of it or something. I don't know, but it's like, I mean, he's an asshole, right? But he's not like Jack. Like this guy is an asshole. You get face value. You're getting an asshole. Like I'm a jerk.
Sawyer makes no secret about being a jerk.
Right.
Sawyer, like everything about him, like it's up front. Like he's an asshole right to your face.
Right.
Jack is kind of an asshole sometimes, all in the name of, oh well, I'm doing this for you.
Right. He's the holy savior leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
That gets kind of old, but yeah, he does seem like he's an interesting character, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with him as well. As I'm hoping these people get along a little bit better in the future.
Yeah.
Because come on, man, we got a lot of episodes with people that hate each other.
Yeah. The only other note I think it's just a random note, I guess, but like when Shannon is having trouble breathing, Sun shows some ingenuity. She like recognizes some leaves out in the jungle, and like she like comes up with kind of like using the leaves. Was it eucalyptus leaves? I think they were
so.
To kind of help alleviate some of Shannon's symptoms. And so just kind of an interesting character moment for like Sun sort of showing up with it's kind of a solution for some things that, in a Sawyer focused episode where it's like Jack versus Sawyer, Saeed versus Sawyer, Boone and Shannon, like that Sun sort of comes out of nowhere with kind of a solve is just interesting. Like I wouldn't have predicted that. It's kind of a nice moment. The only mystery I think really coming out of this episode that I think you can identify right off the bat would be, so just this flashback was notable because we still are wondering, why was Sawyer in Australia?
Yeah.
Because that episode, like Sawyer's flashback was not about him in Australia. It was, at some point in his, he was running a con. You saw him run that con and then him decide not to do it at the very end because there's a kid involved. But we don't know why Sawyer was on Oceanic Flight 815. So that's just notable. We still need to know why Sawyer was there. Any mysteries from your standpoint?
I don't think so. I don't think so in this episode.
It's like I said, this one was kind of pure character. Like there's not a ton of mystery box stuff in this one.
My main mystery now is, I said earlier, is who hit Saeed, because who doesn't want to leave the island? That's basically who we're talking about, right? So who can we mark off that list? And we know it wasn't Shannon. We know it wasn't Kate. Right. Assuming no one actually did a cigarette fuse thing like Locke talks about.
Right.
Which, how would you time that right? Because Saeed goes first, then someone has to go right after, and then, it's Saeed, then Shannon, then Kate, right? Isn't that the order it went in?
I think so, yeah.
But, I don't know. I don't know who it could have been, because the obvious answer is Sawyer, right? But,
but that doesn't, but he fired his rocket, and again, why would he do it? Yeah. I guess, well, the way that episode ends, I guess there is sort of another question. Where is Saeed going? Yeah. Basically, Saeed, the way the episode ends is Saeed did torture Sawyer, and he's deeply disturbed by what he's done. And he basically says, I can't stay here with you people. Like, I kind of did something I promised I wasn't going to do again. And so I need to kind of, think of it as I need to go into exile, basically. It's like, so why don't I just be useful? How about if I walk the shore of this island? Maybe I can, find something or see how big the island is, or, do something of value, but I can't be around you guys because it's like I'm just really disgusted with myself, basically. So I don't know.
I think it makes sense for someone to do that anyway, because, this is obviously a pretty good sized island. It's not small by any means. Just because, for a, monster, for it to have the animals it has living on it, it has to be, substantial in size to have apex predators that big and, boar and all that.
Yeah, boar are there. Some polar bear has, found a way to live there. So clearly,
did they ever answer that question? Did they ever answer why there's polar bears?
I would say that's a pretty big mystery as to why there are.
Oh man, it's going to sound like blow my mind. I know it.
So, and I'm trying to remember, it was a Sawyer episode. Were there any good nicknames in that one? I didn't write any down. Anything that jumps out at you?
At one point, he said Cave Town. What I don't know.
Yeah, he did. He referred. Yeah, that's right. He refers it as Cave Town, and I feel like.
It probably was.
He had kind of like a racist name for Saeed at one point, but I can't remember.
Oh, he did. He did. Oh, shit. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, he did.
He had something like that. All right. Well, so that was... So we watched 4. Jay is so excited about Lost that he wants to see if we can maybe do even more than 4 episodes at a clip. So for next time, we're going to try to do 6. I think, again, I'm excited about that. I think that would work. it's just a matter of like, can we cover them with enough detail? Like, does the show run over? I don't know. So next time we're going to try 6. We're going to see how that goes, and then if we need to refactor, we will. But the next 6 episodes of Lost to watch for Mr. the Stingray are Solitary, Raised by Another, All the Best Cowboys Have Daddy Issues, Whatever the Case May Be, Hearts and Minds, and Special.
He called Jack Cowboy at one point, I think.
I think so. I think so. But I would again, but you're actually kind of starting to think about the right kind of stuff here, Jay. Like reading those episode names.
Yeah.
Who do you think who's taking who's got the flashback that week? That actually kind of was something that like people would theorize about. Like, okay, who's this week's flashback? And what are we going to learn? Or, that kind of stuff. So, it's a good question. I don't know.
Cool. Well, sounds good, man. It definitely leaves a lot to the imagination. So I'll make my predictions and get started.
Well, are there any, just after we've talked about anything, are there any other predictions, anything you left off that you want to talk about for the next sequence of episodes, or just sort of a general prediction, or did that kind of cover what you had?
I don't really know of anything else there's some characters they haven't, really covered, and they're probably going to get their time to shine. So
yeah.
Yeah, and I know it's going to be a curveball every time. So, it's something that you're not just going to be able to predict.
I agree.
Which is why these are so funny.
I will warn you. I'm going to say it, but when you reach the end of these 6 episodes, I think you're going to be like, I want to watch the next one. I think that is a thing that will happen. That's my prediction. That's just something I'm predicting. So we can talk offline, and next week we'll just be on the honor system. You confirm for the folks at home next week if I was right, like that you were like, oh man, I really want to watch the next one.
Will do. It's working well that I'm watching it. Like, basically I watched these 4 again this afternoon. Yeah. So I was able to, it was all fresh. So it works well like that.
Yeah. And these are some good ones. We're getting into some meat here now. We're doing some good stuff. It should be noted that we are now getting into just because like we were talking about at the top of the show, we are getting into the Carlton Cuse era of Lost. If I'm not mistaken, Confidence Man might have been the episode that was like being filmed when like Damon Lindelof was like, I quit. I can't do that. I can't do this. And I think that Carlton Cuse co-wrote Hearts and Minds with Javier Grillo Markowitz. Like that was his first like credited writing episode. I think he was involved before then, but like just giving you some signposts as far as like the episodes in the next bundle. But we're kind of at that point where like the show is kind of reaching a maturity level that the first bunch, while really good, just didn't, again, we're kind of hitting the point where, the show is kind of off and running from like a production standpoint. So, all right. Well, Jay, I have a blast doing this with you. I hope to get your reactions as you're watching it. And
absolutely.
We will reconvene next week, man. I'm looking forward to it.
And me too. That sounds good.
Yeah. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
All right. Good night, folks.